we said was achieved or worked well. One, that overall it is government-led, and secondly, the government led the assessments and the responses. What needs to be improved? The government has limited financial and human resources to respond to such a catastrophic event. I think I can clarify or expand that there's not enough human resources all around for this kind of event. Number two, weak linkages between NDMO and central government agencies, and not enough, or to enable them to know what to do in disasters. Our recommendation that one, the SOPs need to be reviewed so that they are set out clearly the policies and procedures of different elements within NDMO and EOCs and other government agencies to suit the different scenarios. And the second recommendation is to increase the number of simulation exercises between government agencies to help them understand their roles in disasters. And we would just like to clarify that the recommendations are things that we see as practical that can be done between now and October or November before the next cyclone season. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions for that first group? Any questions for that first group? Very practical, very succinct. Thank you very much indeed. The second group we'll come to in no particular order. We're dealing with NEOC operations. What were the strengths of the NEOC? What were the major challenges, resources, particular skill sets, etc.? And what can be done to strengthen the NEOC? The rapporteur?
Thank you. From this group, the strength of NEOC, one is the centralization of decision making. The second one is there is an established structure that is both top-bottom and bottom-up. The major challenges, first one is the lack of capacity to deal with the information and everything else that need to be done during the process. Second one is the weakness in communications between different links, no proper functionality of CCCM, which is under-resourced, but also lack of personnel for logistics and communications. Our recommendations: train and allocate search personnel to assist at NEOC, strengthen the link and utilize JPOC, who have the capacity to assist, commitment from the government to recruit PTO, CCM, logistics and communications officer, and other support staff at NEOC to each cluster. Increase budget for NDMO and allocate operational funds for NEOC and decentralized funds for PEOC, that is the Provincial Emergency Operation Centers. The last one is the safety of the NOC building itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions to that table? Again, very concise, very succinct recommendations. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? If not, let's move on to the next group. The theme for this group was intercluster coordination and the Vanuatu humanitarian team. What worked well in intercluster coordination and where could it be improved? And what were the strengths of the VHT in the response? And what were its major challenges and how could these be addressed? The rapporteur, please. Okay, well, that was interesting. Here we go.
So we looked at the VHT and intercluster coordination as two separate areas. with the VHT and also the Pacific Humanitarian Team, PHT. It was agreed by the group that more clarity was needed around what the VHT was, how it's linked in with government and its roles. And a recommendation coming out of that was that VHT members should reconvene after lessons learned and consider if the VHT structure is still appropriate or needs amendment. So specific things that are recommended to look at are links with government, role of UN OCHA versus VHT, role of VHT after a disaster, roles and responsibilities, and how to make it more inclusive. For intercluster coordination, there was general agreement that the system worked very well. Two recommendations that were made was that the intercluster meetings could become more strategic rather than reporting activities going on. And linked with that is to restrict or focus the meeting participants to cluster heads and a Pacific Humanitarian Team representative. There was also a suggestion that there be a high-level group created, if there's not already one in place, for decision-making, which includes both government and non-government members, and the purpose of that group would be to make decisions around the structure of the VHT and cluster system itself.
Okay, thank you very much indeed again. Solid recommendations apparently coming out of that group. Does anybody have any comments or any questions? You don't get to go home earlier if you don't. We'll be doing physical jerks outside. That was an attempt at humor. Good. Moving swiftly onwards to the next group then on national coordination. This group looked at preparedness and specifically response preparedness, i.e. those actions that can immediately have a beneficial effect on the response, those actions you take immediately prior to a response. So what response preparedness actions work well at national level for the government, NDMO, VHT, clusters and other stakeholders, and what actions need to be taken to improve national response preparedness? And how was national surge capacity used effectively in the response, and where can it improve? Spokesperson, please.
So I think it was a vast subtopic, and I think it's. I think on the first things, it's good to recognize that PWD and VMF did a fantastic initial response, and I think it's come from a good preparedness before. Possible because there's a good finance managing with the budget. So I think this component of the response has to be kept. And also the government and DigiCell proposition of fuel generator tower before, a few days before the PAM. On a key recommendation, the first one is the question of briefing induction on the surge capacity which come outside of the country. I think it's part of preparedness at national level because as there was a call for emergency when the circus, the cavalry arrived, they were not able to understand the system and how the coalition was working before PAM. So this is the first recommendation, briefing package induction for all the in-country high rotation staff. The second one, pre-existing cluster worked well. But as shelter cluster was missing, the good things to have a call to IFRC to set up 3 weeks before, it was preparedness, and 1 day before was surge capacity. Free recognition of the NGMO open and welcoming mind for everybody to come in Vanuatu was to be commended, while there is a need to more space if there is a cyclone PAM response level, and that 8 staffs are not sufficient to cope with such need in coordination, and with linked with the need perhaps to review the EOC structure on this in this aspect. Last one, it's a bit, as said before, need to clarify, review VHT role versus clusters. what is the role in coordination, and what is the mandate of each of the level of coordination? Something missing?
Okay, thank you very much indeed again. Short, concise and choppy recommendations. Are there any questions before we move from national to international? Any questions at all? All of the groups, please remember you have to fill in your recommendation tables. Please do that. I will collect that and it will go to the Secretariat. If you don't do it, much of your valuable information will have to be processed in another manner, which means I'll have to do it, which is no good at all. Okay, handing over now to Anthony to cover the regional and international mechanisms.
Okay, thank you. So we had 3 groups that looked at the regional and international mechanisms. We'll start first with the group that's immediately in the frontier that looked at regional mechanisms, roles, success, challenges of the PHT, the France, RDRT, regional disaster response teams, the Melanesian Spearhead Group, Council for Regional Organizations in Pacific, and so on. So I'd like to call on the rapporteur to give us the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. So successes, we acknowledge that with the regional agencies or the governments that came in, they when they came in to assist, they worked very closely with the provinces and with the structures in place, and they were able to follow the governance structures. So that's a key achievement here. Another one was there was a lot of information that was received by FRANZ, F-R-A-N-Z, from NDMO, and this led to quite good coordination around scheduling, and they were able to tell us what available resources they had so that we could help them to get supplies and things out to areas that were really worst affected. Another thing that we view as quite a good achievement is with regards to the EOC, working together with regional partners who came in to try and pool resources such as using vehicles, and this helped assisting the provinces. We got a good example from Tafea province with how this was quite effective. With regards to challenges, there were challenges around communication, telecommunications, and trying to get in touch to see what was happening, and this led to, in some provinces, and this led to some confusion with the initial assessments and information coming through. One of the challenges faced with regards to the civil military support that came in, there was maybe sometimes it was a bit unequal access to military resources for some of the smaller NGOs, with the communication not going through with regards to who could put supplies on and when and what time. That wasn't very clearly communicated at all times. Recommendations. There's a recommendation here for a need to formalize donations that come in through the structured systems so it can be managed and reported on. And having clearly defined roles and responsibilities, because there's some confusion between national and regional clusters. And I think in the case of TCPAM, there was one cluster where there was international and regional food security cluster. And the other thing would be around strengthening military coordination support by assuring that we have up-to-date information coordinating with the military through NDMO. So just making sure that we have a database that's set up and we have information. So when they come in, different countries come in with military support, we have information there that they can use, and they know where to go, which areas they can access, and that'll help with getting things out to the islands. And I think that's all. Maybe my colleagues will let me know if I forgot something.
Okay, thank you. We'll now process to the next group directly behind them. And this group looked at international mechanisms, roles, successes, and challenges of mechanisms such as UNDEC, the UN systems, which revolved around the finance side of it, SURF, Flash Appeal, and the Joint HAP. IFRC mechanisms such as the FACT, DREF, and the IFRC appeal, as well as other entities like the World Bank, etc. So if I could ask their repertoire to please make some comments.
Okay, thank you. The key achievements from this group, first of all, is that the flash was completed on time. I think the clusters were only given like 48 hours to complete this, and it was actually completed on time. Another key achievement is that the global cluster systems are in place and supported by the international staff and technicians. Also, we have the coordinated assessments were done on time with dedicated people who were part of the assessment teams. It is also the first time for HAP and PDNA to be integrated and also in line with the government initiatives. So this is the first time. These are some of the achievements. Constraints and challenges. The first one is government was not aware of the humanitarian funding allocations and priority process. Who decides how many percent of that fund to be allocated was not done by the government. It was not done by the government or the donor. So government feels that they are not really part of these humanitarian funding allocations. The second one is government understanding on time frame for Flash and Flash, HAP, and the PDNA to allow government and UN NGOs to plan to do in alignment to UN and government needs. Those are the two constraints. We also come up with some recommendations. The first one here is we need to understand linkages between the Pacific humanitarian team and the Vanuatu humanitarian team, the government and UN humanitarian coordination and the regional coordination. So we need to understand the linkages between these organizations or these institutions. There is also the one for the security support arrangements. That's to do with humanitarian security issues. I think it's not very much stress, so we need to stress this. Well, we have this as a recommendation. Regional in the government linkages or MOUs regarding disaster management. We need to have this in place. We also need to look at review. We need to review the staging or planning of early recovery. That's another one. And we also have the UN system of humanitarian responses to be fully explained to the government. The government needs to know about the UN system, so it has to be explained to understand global UN systems. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the second group. Any other comments from around the group? Okay, gone. So we'll now, there's one comment from WARWICK, if someone could throw him a mic.
Just quick comment, and I'll just like to stress that today here I'm primarily to hear and to listen and to absorb sort of how the response has been experienced by different stakeholders. Just wanted to speak to this particular group. The higher level processes like flash appeal and humanitarian action plan and PDNA, they all happened within a relatively short period. And as you have pointed out, these processes have not really been tested on that scale in Vanuatu environment, and they have tested severely the cluster system and the coordination resources, and a lot of additional surge capacity coordination that were put at the disposal of clusters. Again, they were primarily focused on these high-level processes, and the feedback that I was receiving that it was very much confusing to the clusters, to the governments, and we spent a lot of time explaining how it works. At the same time, I would like to, well, I'm very thankful for the additional capacity by the UNDAC team that they did roll out the flash appeal, which enabled the early stage of response, and all that happened very sort of. I mean, it was a great support to have that. Without UNDAC, we wouldn't have moved as fast as we did. But we still, there's a lot of work that needs to be done for a humanitarian action plan in the context of Vanuatu to be sort of all clusters understand the methodologies, and they can work with that as almost like a that will be given that when we do have a major cyclone, that humanitarian action plan is going to be rolled out and will be expected, and clusters will be able to work within that system and contribute in a meaningful way to that tool. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one more comment.
Yeah, I think one clarification, and I think it's for both sides. I think it's for the Vanuatu context, but also for the overall system. This is not the UN cluster system, it's the interagency cluster system. I think it's important to clarify that, because a lot of time I hear UN clusters. No, we are federation, we are not UN. We support the interagency cluster mechanism. And I think the understanding that this surge is coming from the YASC is concerning UN, Red Cross, Red Crescent movements, NGOs. And I think that's important for all of us to remind that, not to come in the caricature for Vanuatu government to be even more confused. I think it's important at each level to clarify it's Red Cross, Red Crescent, UN, and NGOs. That's just, yeah.
Thank you. That was a good feedback there. We'd like to now go to the last group, table 15, who looked at donor coordination and communication, primarily communication that was provided to donors, between donors, from the NEOC, from government, and also coordination of the civil military side of things, which was pretty much in line with the donors' mandates. So I'd like to now ask the rapporteur from table 15.
Thank you. I will be presenting on behalf of the donors team. I think most of the achievements that have been achieved during the operation, most of our colleagues have already mentioned these, and also we have the donors all up to date with what to assist the Vanuatu government. We'll go straight into the recommendations. First of the recommendation is to prioritize the national capacity through identifying gaps and key positions to reduce reliance on international communities. Second, international support needs to be disciplined and need to work within the priority needs and requests of the Vanuatu government. Need to continue dialogue with traditional donors, improve communication with non-traditional donors. Stakeholders, civil military support
the government and agencies in the use of prioritization of military assets. That's all.
Oh, okay. Thank you, the last group. Now that brings us to the end of the feedback from this session. Again, we'd like to please remind you all to have those put onto the matrix A3 pages and for those to be collected by the Secretariat. That is really where we can capture your information. I'd now hand over to Sebastian to have a summary of our session this afternoon.
Yeah, I'll probably do a little bit more than that because it's 13 minutes past 5, which means we've got 15 minutes to run. Rather than try to summarize everything that happened today, which would be a very tedious time for you, I'll just briefly talk about what we managed to achieve. Clearly, this morning we spoke primarily about early warning, provincial level response, and we spoke a little about CCCM. There were some really notable points made and some very good presentations. The ones that stick in my mind is the need to understand the existing capacity and resilience of the people of Vanuatu, the need to strengthen sufficient assets to communicate with each other. There was a point made that many traditional systems, pen and paper are as good as anything else, and that the scramble to use technology shouldn't override the way in which people do business. The need for standardization, not just in communications, but across the board was mentioned. Alice gave a very good summary of the evacuation centers, but sadly I wasn't in the room at the time, and maybe she could fill in for me on that. Following an excellent lunch, we moved on to the national and international piece. We had presentations, of course, both from, forgive me, I've missed a presentation. We had an excellent presentation from Director NDMO in the morning to start off. We had another presentation from Peter, again on the national coordination system, which grounded the discussions we had thereafter. And we heard from Fiji on their deployment, or the deployment of Pacific Island country in support of the government of Vanuatu. And they made the point that I think any assisting state or organization should always bear in mind that sovereignty is principle in any response. And the national government through the NDMO ran the response, and those people who came here came to support that response. I won't even bother trying to summarize the conversation we've just had, although there's some very good points coming out of that related to, for instance, the linkages between the PHT, the VHT, the government, the UN and regional organizations, the need for regional MOUs, the need to better understand from the international community the existing legal frameworks and the way in which business is done here before ever turning up to help, and indeed perhaps being a little bit more transparent and clear about the assistance that regional and international organizations can provide to the government of Vanuatu. There was a underlying theme, and it's not unique to this particular country, it's throughout the region, throughout the world, and that is the need to invest in disaster management systems from the local level to the national level. And of course, that has to be balanced with other priorities that the government might have. Again, I'm not going to go through those, we've just discussed them. What I would say is that your participation has been vibrant and very interesting. We have a lot of good points coming out. Without flogging a dead horse, please, please, please fill in your forms and hand them to the Secretariat. It is quite often the case, I'm sure that none of you are guilty of this, that some people turn up to the first day of a workshop and not the second day. I've taken photographs of all of you. I know who you are, and I look forward to greeting you individually tomorrow. Please be aware that it's an 8:30 start, which will start with a review of day one. That's as far as I intend to go with a wrap-up. I would ask if there are any questions from the floor, any comments, any serious omissions today that we need to correct tomorrow. Okay, I'll end my piece and hand over to Anthony by saying thank you for your participation. And again, a huge thank you to the organizers who worked so hard on this, and all the people who are not part of the conversation, from the sound team to the secretariat to the computer goblins and so on. Anthony.
Thank you, Sebastian. That brings us to the end of day one. And I can see everybody breathe a sigh of relief and a smile on their face as they look forward to tomorrow. One last thing, please complete your evaluation forms. Do let us know how today went, how we could improve it tomorrow, how the food went, and how much less you'd like tomorrow. With that, we'd like to echo also the thanks to the hotel for an excellent job that they've done by keeping us nice and cool today. We'll try better tomorrow to regulate the temperature. Other than that, does anyone in this room have anything they'd like to particularly add or comment on before we close for the day and see you all tomorrow or this evening at the Nakamal, whichever comes first? One question.
Good afternoon again. I just want to add something from not just from a Pacific perspective, but I'm actually from the Caribbean, and there were two notable instances during the work of disaster recovery process. We tend to overlook certain key issues. And two of those I'm going to highlight is the abuse of the marginalized, like maybe the women, young women who seek refuge or help. They are being exploited financially and sexually. So, and then we have the other side of security where, whilst we focus heavily on the recovery process, we have our border open, and some of our countries act like transshipment points for some of those notorious drug, the barons. So whilst we are focusing on all those key issues of national coordination and all this stuff, I want us to also understand that there are other key issues that actually determine our own national security that we need to focus on still whilst we do this process. I just want to add this so at least it keeps us abreast and know that it's not only our homes and our houses that needs to be protected, but also our, as we say, our sovereignty and the welfare of our young women and the disenfranchised in our society. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Going once. There's one from Peter Carissa. You have a mic on your table.
Thank you. This is not the comment, it's just an announcement for our government representatives from different ministries. It's good for them to come tomorrow as well, because I've seen one here and it just disappeared after first session, I don't know. So it's important for all the government officers, my colleagues from government officers, to be here tomorrow, because we have some important session tomorrow for logistics and other sections as well.
Thank you. Important announcement for government officers. Your photos will be pinned up outside tomorrow morning. If there's no other comments, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Do have a good evening, and we shall see you tomorrow at 08:30 hours. Thank you. Awesome. This is the one I think.
Can the facilitation team please stay back for a debriefing session? It won't be long. We might buy you a drink. We'll give you a lift into town. So please, facilitation team, do stay back. Thank you.